Hello, everyone. Hello. Welcome. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? It looks like my microphone's on. Okay. Happy vernal equinox, everyone. And if you're watching the replay, today is the equinox in March 2025. And today I'm excited because I have a talk that I would like to share on the medicine wheel. This is a beautiful time, I feel like, to talk about this. And I'm just lighting some Palo Santo here, cleansing the space. So I invite you to join me in taking a nice deep inhale and exhale if you can, wherever you are. And I'd also like to share my song, Grateful Soul. This is a medicine wheel invocation. So if you're ready, just be open to receive. Thank you, body. Thank you, earth. Thank you, water, wind, and heart. Thank you, body. Thank you, earth, for the light of my soul. For the light of my soul. 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 Thank you, body. Thank you, earth. Thank you, water, wind, and heart. Thank you, body. Thank you, earth, for the light of my soul. For the light of my soul. For the light of my soul. So I think that some of what I would like to share with you in this message today, I want to let you know that some of this is channeled from source consciousness. Um, and some of this information that I'm sharing today has been passed down to me, knowledge that has been passed down to me from spiritual healers, native tribe elders, books I've read, um, yoga teachers or yoga teacher training. And I do want to say that I'm not an expert on this subject. However, I'm just someone who has been ritualistically healing their own trauma throughout many years and many different forms. And I'm excited to share what I learned on the subject. And I've also done some of this own practice of the medicine wheel. So feel free to take what resonates today and leave what doesn't. And I would also like to show you let's see if I can see it here, medicine wheel card. Okay. So if you're ready, I'm going to start by talking about some of the animal spirit of this current year, actually. So this is the year 2025 currently that I'm in. If you're watching the replay, maybe it's stating this, but this is the year of the snake, as they say in the Chinese zodiac. And I'm going to talk about some of the animal spirit medicine, how I connect to it for the snake energy. And so when I think about snake, I think of shedding the old skins. Like I was meditating in early March of this year, and while I was meditating, I actually kind of had this like bodily feeling of like a snake moving out of old skin. And it was strange, but it felt necessary for where I was at energetically. And I believe snakes can also be seen as symbols of transformation, healing. And to me, I see similarities between the human spine and the spine of a snake. And I also think about connections to Kundalini rising. And I was so curious about what Kundalini was and how this connected to snakes that I actually chose for my yoga teacher training project, I chose using serpent symbology of Kundalini yoga for overcoming addiction. And how I understand Kundalini rising energy is, imagine the spinal column is like a central staff, and there are types of energy both visualized, and there's different types of energy, but imagine two different colored snakes, and this is like just energy. It's not actually snakes, but it's like one blue one and one red one or pink. And imagine these could be like masculine, feminine, or yin yang, and there's no like right or wrong. It's just different aspects of energy. And these two aspects winding around and up from the base of the spine, interlacing around the chakras to the top of the head. And this is where it symbolizes union with the divine and enlightenment. So that's the best explanation of Kundalini rising that I can give in a very short time. So I'm a belly dancer, and in belly dance, there's a lot of articulation of the spine. And to me, I think of this as creating more space, more freedom for energy to flow through the body more freely. And think about maybe how amazing it is that a snake can wrap its entire body around something like a tree branch. And this is really interesting because when snakes mate, they intertwine. See if I can do it. They intertwine. And if you've ever seen the alchemical symbol, the caduceus, which is often portrayed as a symbol of healing in Western medicine, this is connecting to to that snakes intertwining kind of symbolization. And I have a few more connections here with the snake. So, has anyone ever seen a picture of a snake eating an egg, or has already eaten the egg? So, to me, there's some connection between women and pregnancy here. And when I was younger, I was afraid of being bit by snakes, and I don't really know why. I mean, I might have had some dreams about them, and that could have been part of it. But as I matured, I got to connect with some snakes, maybe even say befriend some of them, and I actually enjoyed connecting with them. And when I did my yoga project on serpents, I researched and I found information that in some cultures they were connected to enlightenment, and perhaps this has to do with the kundalini kind of aspect or idea. So, because of all this beautiful and powerful animal medicine, I think it's wonderful to share about this talk, to share with this talk about the medicine wheel. And I'm grateful to share this talk and to talk about the medicine wheel coming up next. And during this discussion, or during this talk, I also plan to mention the elements, the chakras, the four directions, and maybe later I plan to do a little practice before closing, and that might be on a part 2. So this is why I put part 1. So 2 different parts. Okay. So breathe. Okay, so moving into the medicine wheel. So the idea of the medicine wheel, the first time I started connecting with this idea was when I read a fictional book actually called Ceremony. And what I heard about the medicine wheel from my research, it said that the medicine wheel had been used in many different Native American tribes. And So going back to the book ceremony, one ritual that the main character Teo did in the book was a medicine wheel ceremony or circle. And so and this idea of the medicine wheel has actually been talked about in many different tribes, and this is what I've read about in books. And I what I learned was that the medicine wheel was being connected to the elements, earth, water, wind, and fire, the four directions, and in the center is the balance of these. So next, I want to talk about my connection and how I see this my perspective of how the chakras, the elements, and the medicine wheel could connect. So the chakras and the elements. So I'm going to talk about the root chakra first. So the root chakra connects with the earth element. And as a woman, I feel connected to Gaia, our Mother Earth. And it was probably this connection that led me to studying environmental science in college. And I recently created a goddess course and paintings, well, within the last few years. and to for I did this to help connect women to their own magic, and I believe that we are connected to the earth and some of the same magical qualities the earth has. And I believe in women, we can see this in birthing new life. And in the spring, we can see this as the flowers and the trees start blooming again. So, some affirmations connected to the root chakra are: I am safe, I am secure, I am rooted, and I have a chakra meditation using these affirmations. If you're interested in that, I put a link in the description of the chakra meditation playlist or the chakra playlist. And from my perspective, connecting with the root chakra and the earth are great for grounding nervous energies, releasing fear. So, in another practice, so if one is interested in doing this practice or a similar practice, one idea is just to imagine it could be a negative or low energy just flowing down the body, like light or energy flowing down, sending it down the body. You can use the hands or not. And one can imagine it going it down the legs, down the feet into the earth, and then the earth transmutes it into more love and light in the world. So exhaling, releasing the energy down, inhaling, maybe imagining flowers sprouting up, connecting to this transformational power of the earth. So it's like creating more beauty out of releasing that negative energy. And I believe that the earth is sacred. And one idea is that if one is doing work directly with the earth, it's nice to ask for permission to do this or consent, I believe, and just listen and see what arises and use your own intuition about doing deeper conscious connection with the earth. So, once again, just imagining releasing negative energy out of the body on the exhale, flowing towards the earth. Inhale, imagining seeing flowers blossoming around you. So, that was the root chakra and the earth element. And then it leads me to water, the sacral chakra, Svadhisthana chakra, which connects to the water element. So this is like the creative juices, the liquids, the fluids that help create new life. And I mean, this could be looked at in many different ways, just like creativity as well, but in general. Going back into the physical body kind of aspect, thinking about how there's both reproductive systems in both women and men in this kind of like sacral chakra area, liquid connecting them both. And in women, it's like the womb, which I kind of like imagine as like the ocean. And then there's like fallopian tubes, which have eggs. And then in men, there's the sperm or seeds. And that connects to the second chakra, Svadhisthana chakra, the water element. So I'm going to invite you here to breathe if you can. And the next part is talking about air and the wind element. And this connects to the Manipura chakra. So here I invite one to connect to this by breathing from the lower belly into the upper belly. And then exhale back down to the root. And you can either continue like this if that feels comfortable, or just return to a natural breath. So going back to the Manipura chakra, the solar plexus chakra. In bodily anatomy, this can connect to the diaphragm or the upper belly, which is around the lungs. So this is why there's connections to the air element. So nice deep inhale and exhale, just feeling the air element flowing in and out. And the next the next element is fire. And I could see this connecting to the power of transformation. And in some ways, I could see how the fire element connects with both the solar plexus and the heart chakra. And here I invite one to take a breath from the upper belly and moving it into the chest. And then exhale back to the root, returning to a natural breath. And I can even envision that both the solar plexus and the heart are connected to the fire element because they can both pump and create heat in the body. They both have that pumping action. So in the diaphragm, that quick pumping action can be called the breath of fire in yoga, which sounds like this. And in the heart chakra, this can connect to the physical muscle of the heart. And the heartbeat is pumping blood throughout the body. So if you want to take a moment, I invite you to just connect to the heart center, maybe bringing a hand there and breathing in deeply, maybe feeling the heartbeat. So I guess my deeper question with all of this is, what are the energetics of the heart? And why would this energy behind it create a muscle that is integral to the functioning of the whole system? And you can release the hand down and just return to a natural breath. Maybe that's a question to think about some other time. But I'm just going to continue on. So, both the breath of fire and the air energy of the heart can increase heat in the body. So, think about how the act of running, like how the heartbeat and the breathing both increase, and that warms the body up. And that's how I can see that those parts are kind of connected. I mean, it's all connected, but breathing. And I'm going to go back to the air element for a moment and feeling the breath move into the throat. The air element can also be connected to the throat chakra. And in the throat, the air that flows through can create sound, including language, laughter, crying, singing, etc. And just returning to a natural breath. And that was some of my connections for the chakras and the elements. And I have some elemental yoga series of earth, water, wind, and fire. If you're interested in that, feel free to check out the elemental yoga playlist that I have on my channel, and I've linked it below here. And just a note about that, if you're interested in that, the earth element yoga is actually called dancing tree yoga. So just a little information about that. I also recently created an all seven chakras guided meditation video and all seven chakras yoga video. If anyone is interested in delving into these deeper, I have the information on the playlist in the description below if you're interested in checking that one out. So I believe that the medicine wheel has connections to balancing the elements within. Let me say it again. So I believe that the medicine wheel has connections to balancing the elements within. And so I consider that the elements can be in balance and that I want to give some examples of my perception of this idea of balancing the elements. And I want to start with the element of fire because it's a hot topic, pun intended. And this one might be a little bit more obvious if it's not in balance too. So the fire element I can see as being connected to ideas like drive or ambition. And I mean, it's like almost Aries season. So like I've heard astrologers talk about this in connection to Aries. I'm not necessarily an astrologer at this moment, so maybe I shouldn't get into this topic, but how I see the fire element is that like it's at a higher frequency of energy than earth and water. Um, but too much fire or sustaining high energy for long periods of time could lead to burnout. So, what do I mean by burnout? I mean like feelings of exhaustion, and this could be physically, emotionally, and or mentally. But too little fire, having too little of the fire element could show up as energetically like apathy or lack of drive to experience things that one wants to experience. So, to balance out too much fire, some ideas maybe could be to bring in some watery energy, like cooling energy or downward movement to ground the energy. And too little fire, maybe consider adding some physical movement to possibly lift the energy. And of course, these are all dependent on a number of things, so just take what resonates and leave what doesn't. But spiritually, I can connect to the fire element to connecting to like purpose or connecting to the soul doing what it loves to do and feeling called to do. I hope that makes sense. So, moving on to the water element. and balancing out the water element. Wait, let me take a drink here. So water has density. Um, so when I think about water, I think about the flowy energy and how sometimes that can be connected to emotions such as sadness, tears, or peaceful, calm energy. But if a person has seen like waterfalls and raging rivers and or a stagnant pond, maybe one has seen firsthand the range of the flow of water can take. I hope that makes sense. So, some concepts that I'm connecting to with this, with water in balance, um, some ideas with this concept is like feeling the emotions, allowing them to come up, to acknowledge them, and if possible, to identify them. And thinking about emotions, I think of like a wave in the ocean and how thinking about the difference between like a wave on a fair weather day versus a wave during, say, like a hurricane or a storm. So this leads me to talking about water out of balance. And it's not saying that anything is right or wrong. This is just, I'm just making connections here. So feeling disconnected from emotions could be a sign of water out of balance. Feeling overwhelmed by emotions or having long periods of one particular emotion. If feeling So if having a lot like, if feeling like there's too much watery energy or, like, even coldness or frozenness, maybe to help bring this kind of back in balance, consider adding some heat with movement practices, and if feeling low, adding something to help bring in some wind energy, like perhaps breathing exercises. And that breath of fire that I was doing earlier, the Kapalabhati breathing, pumping action with a diaphragm is a way that's supposedly helped to stoke the fire within the body. So some other examples of kind of balancing out the too much water energy could be, for example, like singing or dancing, listening to music, grounding and recentering if one is feeling like they're in the waves during the hurricane. Maybe some grounding and recentering might be helpful, which leads me back to the earth element. So talking about the earth and balance. So characteristics of earth. Earth can sometimes be like dense or hard like a rock, but it can also be like soft and gentle or fertile. Um, and when I consider earth, I think of like the lower element on this planet. And when I think of this like low density characteristic, this makes me think of like roots or foundations. So for example, a seed can be planted in the fertile soil to grow new life. And it can take root and grow up towards the sky, maybe one day bearing fruit of its own or a delight of its own, maybe flowers or whatever its magic is. And some characteristics of the earth element in balance could be things like stability, strength, fertility, and this could be connected with the body, the mind, or the spirit. And some connections to the earth element out of balance could be feeling dense, feeling low, feeling low on motivation, carrying a lot of weight, either physically or emotionally. And some ideas to bring the earth element into balance could be maybe bringing in a little bit of wind energy to help with movement, or watery energy inspiration, like flowing through walking or dancing, swimming, singing, etc. And then lastly, coming to the wind element, talking about balancing this out. So I kind of see this as like the upper element, or an upper element, kind of like fire in an upper position. And thinking of air being taken in through the nose, filling the lungs on the inhale, and releasing, letting go. And this can be connected to the heart and the throat too. And I'm just going to talk about kind of what I've learned in science class actually, but thinking about how oxygen flows into the body and then releases that carbon dioxide, flowing, helping to flow blood through the circulatory system. Sorry, I've so take what resonates and leave what doesn't. So in with the new, out with the old. And this is a purifying process, I believe. So in this kind of way, every breath is an opportunity to release what has been and open to receive the new. And feel free to use that if you like that. So, talking about the wind element, bringing it into balance. So, for too little wind physically, this could be seen as shallow breathing, and too much wind mentally could be seen as like racing thoughts. So, to balance out the wind energy, maybe bringing in some grounding, breathing, and exercises to help ground the body, mind, and spirit to recenter. And for too much wind mentally, maybe try slowing down the body, focusing on the breathing, maybe meditation or gentle calming music to help balance the wind energy. Okay, so now I've gone through the balancing the four elements: earth, water, wind, and fire. And next is the four directions: north, south, east, and west. So I've actually heard different medicine people and tribal elders and other shamanic leaders talk about do this practice where they um, call in the four directions and maybe give gratitudes in some ways, or in there's been many different ways that I've heard in respect to this different characteristics, different animals, different colors, different phases of life and elements. So for those of you who are interested in this practice or trying this, or if you're already doing this, I'm sharing today is just what feels connected to me, um, and some of it I'll explain why, and just know that this is just an idea of it. It doesn't have to be like no one has to take this as a script to do, besides me, you know? Um, so all that said, I've done some calling in of the 4 directions in the past, and when I've done it, I sometimes I've started with doing it in the east because the east is the direction of the rising sun, and because of that to me it's connected to like new life, or the baby phase of life, um, the beginning of the circle. I'm like getting I'm like getting verklempt right now. The color yellow, the element of earth, and this could be connected to many different animals, um, but because it's connection to like the sun in the east, I'm thinking of like the lion spirit, and thinking about hold on, let me breathe here for a moment. I'm like crying. Okay, so thinking about the opposite side of the spectrum is the west, and how the sun sets, and this is where generally the sun sets, and because of this reason, this could also be seen as the elder phase. So maybe giving respect to elder wisdom. And I've heard of water being connected to this directional orientation, and I've always resonated with that for some reason. And I've actually been on the west coast of the US and seen many beautiful crystal clear waters, so I like that. So that's how I connect to it. And then thinking about the northern direction, I actually connect with this idea in a little bit of a different way. So, thinking about a cycle, the cycle of the year, so like spring, winter, sorry, winter, spring, summer, fall. Winter, spring, summer, fall. So if the year was in like a circle shape or like a clock, and the clock was at 12, I think of this as like winter, so like white as snow. And this could also be seen as like the liminal space or like spiritual space. And one could imagine this like before birth or after death. Um, and this could be like connected with the wind element. And this could also be connected with like animal spirits like owls or birds or elephants. And then in the south is the opposite of that. So, like the summer solstice, the opposite of the winter solstice. Thinking of like the heat, the fire element, the color red. I think of beautiful women dancing. And in this phase of life, I think of like the prime of life, the full swing, the rhythm of life. And this can be connected to possibly the animal spirit of the snake. So, this might seem like a little bit more of an esoteric way about looking at this, but I've gone through the 4 elements: earth, water, wind, and fire, and the 4 directions: east, west, north, and south. And for some reason, I want to come back to the center of the being. And I would also like to do this outside if possible. So I may pause the video and come take a little break and come back and do like a medicine wheel practice outside. So doing a part 2 here. So I have those descriptions in the replay if you're interested in anything that I talked about during today's discussion. And hopefully, I'll put a description. hopefully I'll link the part 2 in the description of this video when I come back later at some point. So if you're interested in that, stay tuned. And yeah, thank you for joining. Love and light.